I've decided to write pretty much exclusively about dead animals, since that's all I can seem to get published. This is an essay I actually wrote some time ago. It really was published. Called A Consolation. My sweet, quirky Seeger was gone, put down in December after a month of incessant gas colics that the vets could neither diagnose nor fix. After his death, I became hypervigilant with regard to Tommy, my surviving horse, and little Twee, the pony given to him for Christmas. My paranoia was obvious even to my neighbors. I left the barn lights on around the clock, illuminating the stalls and paddocks so that I could check on the horses in the middle of my sleepless nights. I agonized over the simplest of things, vaccinations, hay, the quality of my pasture, called the clinic over trivial problems, and refused to be off the property for more than a few hours. And so that morning, when I heard the sound of a horse screaming, Tommy, his whinny sharp, excited, I grabbed my boots and cell without a second thought and bolted for the door. All the way down to the paddocks, I chanted under my breath the usual mantra, be on 4 feet, I prayed. Just be on 4 feet. Tommy was, in fact, standing at the fence line, staring across the street into my neighbor's field. I hurried over to him and patted the tense, extended neck. He swung his head once in my direction to warn me off, then ignored me, continuing to stare, continuing to scream. What is it, buddy? Are you okay? I asked, and turned my head to see what he was looking at. And then I knew. My neighbor had, it appeared, acquired a new horse, an elegant brown bay thoroughbred who grazed quietly near the farthest gate. He was clothed in a puffy Rambo, identical to those worn by my own horses, and all that was really visible were his dark head and faded muzzle, his neck and long, fine legs. The only marking I could see was a hint of white on the heel of one hind foot. From where we stood, Tommy and I, he looked exactly like Seeger. My heart gave a quick, peculiar flutter, and for one fleeting second I thought, like Tommy, that Seeger was back. Tommy couldn't know, of course, that Seeger's destination when he left on that morning 3 weeks before was to the clinic and the relief of euthanasia, not to another horse show from which he would eventually return. And so he called again to his old friend, not with a shrill whinny now, but with the soft, inviting mutter of a stallion to a mare to a foal. It's not Seeger, I said, and Tommy's ears flickered at the name. The tears that were never far away these days filled my eyes. Caught up in my own grieving, I had failed to properly assess or value the depth of Tommy's loss. It was all so sad. I walked to the barn and got some hay, a flake of bright alfalfa to distract Tommy from the fence line, from the horse that wasn't Seeger. He trotted over willingly enough, but dragged as much of the hay as he could manage back to the fence, wanting to eat near his old friend. It wouldn't seem that odd or bothersome to him that Seeger was living across the street now. They had been separated by greater distances at boarding barns in the past, and he had the pony for company at any rate. Seeger was back in his life, and that was all that mattered. I walked to where he stood and pushed my head into his thick mane, thick of tears and mourning. With Seeger restored to him, Tommy no longer needed my pity or my company, and as if to make that clear, he stepped away from me and dropped his head to eat. Abandoned, I turned to look again at the horse across the street. I searched for differences, rejecting the irrational hope that insisted mistakes happen, that somehow Seeger had not died. Behind me, Tommy blew out, expelling breath in the way that horses do only when they are at their most content. Gripped by sudden envy, I tugged at his forelock and forced him to look at me. It's not him, I said again, and Tommy pulled away. What would it hurt, I wondered suddenly, to believe, like Tommy, that the thoroughbred we watched was indeed Seeger? What would it hurt, just for a little while, to consider that some miracle had restored him to us? I thought of philosopher Roger Scruton's contention that the consolation of imaginary things is not imaginary consolation, and was struck by its truth. Something that felt like peace settled over me, nudging aside the grief that had lodged so long inside my throat. I leaned with Tommy against the fence and said in a voice too low to carry across the street, "Hey, Sieg." The horse looked up abruptly, and my heart gave again that funny leap of arrhythmia. Then my eyes fell to his white heel, and I laughed out loud. The markings were on the wrong foot. Oh. That was enough. Seeger was dead and would not be coming back, but he was at peace, as was Tommy now, as I needed to be. It was time for me to go back to the house and back to my life, and to take my consolation from the horses that remained. Still, as I trudged across the pasture through the snow, I decided to avoid my neighbor for the next few days. I didn't want to talk about her new horse quite yet. Just for a little while, I didn't want to learn his name.